The night my husband's family celebrated selling my bakery for $2.3 million, I was sitting alone in my car in the parking lot of a Petro-Canada off Highway 40, eating a granola bar and crying so hard I could barely breathe. That's the image I keep coming back to. Not the lawyers, not the courtroom, not the look on my father-in-law's face when everything collapsed. Just me, 31 years old, parked under a flickering gas station light, wondering how I had let this happen. Let me back up. I opened Fern and Flower when I was 26. Not with family money, not with a business loan from a big bank, with $14,000. I had saved working doubles at a restaurant in Verdun, and another $8,000 I borrowed from my grandmother, who kept the cash in an envelope under her bathroom sink because she didn't trust online banking. She made me promise I'd name something on the menu after her. I named our cardamom honey cake after her. It's still the most ordered item we have. I say we. That's a habit I'm still trying to break. The bakery started in a rented commercial kitchen in St. Henry. I did farmers markets on weekends, wholesale to 2 cafes in Westmount on weekdays, and developed every recipe myself. Evenings at my kitchen table, flour on my laptop keyboard, texting photos to my grandmother for approval. Within 8 months, I had a 6-month waitlist for custom orders. Within 14 months, I signed a lease on a storefront on Notre Dame West. I built the shelving myself. I painted the walls. I designed the logo on a free version of Canva at 2 in the morning, and it ended up on a CBC Montreal segment about women-owned small businesses in the borough. That segment is how my husband's family found out what I actually had. My husband, I'll call him my husband because that's what he was legally for 4 years, was someone I had met before Fern and Flower existed. We got together when I was still working restaurant shifts and he was doing project management for a mid-size construction firm downtown. He was warm and funny, and he came to every single farmer's market I ever did, standing behind my table in the cold handing out samples. I genuinely loved him. I want to be clear about that, because what came later sometimes makes people assume I should have seen it coming from the beginning. I didn't. I don't think he did either, honestly. I think he got overruled. His father is the kind of man who refers to himself in third person when he's making a point. He built a small empire in residential real estate across the South Shore in the 90s, and he has never once, in all the years I've known him, asked a question that wasn't actually a statement wearing a question mark like a costume. His mother's was quieter, but no less deliberate. She collected information the way some people collect grievances, patiently, without revealing what she planned to do with it. The first time they came into Fern and Flower, this was about a year after we opened the storefront. His father walked the whole space slowly, the way a contractor assesses a renovation job. He didn't say anything complimentary. He picked up one of my branded paper bags, turned it over, and said, "You know, with the right structure around this, you could scale." I said I wasn't interested in scaling. He looked at my husband like I had said something in a foreign language. That dinner at their place in Brossard, that's where it started, even if I didn't understand that at the time. His father kept steering the conversation toward bringing the family in, making things more official, talking about how a business this size needed proper oversight. I thought he meant an accountant. I thought he was being helpful. My husband squeezed my hand under the table and I thought that meant we were aligned. We were not aligned. Over the next year and a half, piece by piece, things shifted. My husband started coming in more. Not to help, he'd always helped, that wasn't new. But to make decisions. Supplier calls he'd sit in on and then redirect. Staff schedules he'd adjust without telling me. Small things, individually. He suggested we add his father as a silent business advisor, just for tax purposes, he said. He suggested we structure as a corporation, which was actually good advice, so I did it. He suggested his sister, who had a marketing diploma and had been between jobs for 8 months, come on as our brand manager. I said yes because I was exhausted and she seemed enthusiastic, and I thought it would make family dinners easier. I should have read that incorporation paperwork more carefully. I should have had my own lawyer. Not the family's lawyer. Look it over. I should have done a lot of things. But I was running a bakery that was open 5 days a week, managing 4 employees, handling wholesale accounts for 11 clients, and trying to have a marriage at the same time. I was tired in the specific way that people who build things from nothing get tired, the kind where you're so deep inside the work that you forget to protect yourself from the outside. The offer came in on a Tuesday in March. A Toronto-based hospitality group had been looking to expand their artisan brand portfolio into Quebec, and someone had passed them our CBC segment. They wanted Fern and Flower. Not a franchise deal, not a licensing arrangement. They wanted to acquire the whole thing, the brand, the recipes, the lease, the client list, the wholesale contracts. $2.3 million. My husband came home and told me over dinner, like it was good news, like it was already decided. I put my fork down. I said, "What do you mean you've been in talks with them?" He said his father had made the initial introduction. He said the family had agreed this was the right move. He said I had been too emotionally attached to see the business clearly for a long time. He said the money would be split, and here he pulled out a piece of paper, an actual printed document, according to the shareholder structure of the corporation. I looked at the paper. My name was on it. I owned 31%. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I sat very still at my own kitchen table, in the home I had also contributed to buying, and I read that document 3 times, and then I excused myself and went to the bathroom and sat on the edge of the tub for a long time. My grandmother's cardamom honey cake recipe was in that acquisition. My grandmother, the woman who kept $8,000 in an envelope under her bathroom sink because she believed in me before I believed in myself. I went back to the table and I said, very quietly, that I was not signing anything. My father-in-law arrived 40 minutes later. I don't know if my husband called him or if he was already on his way, but he came in like he owned the place, which I was beginning to understand was exactly how he thought of it. He sat down across from me and explained, with the patience of a man who has never once doubted himself, that the deal was essentially done, that the other shareholders, himself, his wife, his daughter, had the votes to proceed. That my signature was a formality for the cleaner paperwork, but that they could structure around it if necessary. He used the phrase structure around it the way people say we'd prefer your cooperation before they make clear that your cooperation is optional. I asked him about the recipes. He looked at me blankly. I said, the recipes, the formulations, the process documentation, the sourdough starter I've been maintaining for 5 years, the cardamom honey cake, all of it. Who owns that? He said, the business owns that. I said, the business doesn't own my grandmother's recipes. I never assigned them. They were never part of the incorporation documents. They're mine. The room got very quiet. Here's the thing about intellectual property that most people don't think about until they need to. When you start a company, the assets you bring in don't automatically transfer to the company unless you explicitly assign them. I had incorporated the business, I had transferred the lease, the equipment, the client relationships, the brand name. But my recipes, my actual handwritten recipe documents, my process notes, my flavor development journals, I had never formally assigned those. They lived in a locked drawer in my home office and in my head, and as of 8 months prior, in a copyright registration I had filed almost by accident after a conversation with another baker at a food entrepreneur workshop in Rosemont who mentioned it casually over coffee. I had filed copyright on 47 recipes, my name, my registration number, registered with the Canadian Intellectual Property Office. My father-in-law said that wouldn't hold up. I said I had a lawyer who disagreed. I didn't have a lawyer yet. I called one the next morning. What followed was 3 months that I wouldn't wish on anyone. My husband moved back to his parents' place on the South Shore. His sister, who had been our brand manager, sent an email to our wholesale clients saying the business was under new ownership and transitioning to a corporate structure. Without my knowledge, without my permission, and, as my lawyer pointed out, without any legal basis given that the acquisition had not actually closed, one of our longest-running cafe clients called it confused and upset. I apologized. I explained. I kept those accounts. My mother-in-law called me once during those 3 months. Not to ask how I was. To tell me that I was destroying the family and that what I was doing to her son was unforgivable. I listened until she finished. Then I said, as calmly as I could, that I hadn't sold anyone's business out from under them and that when she was ready to have a different kind of conversation, she knew where to find me. She hasn't called since. The acquisition fell through. Not because of the copyright registration alone, though my lawyer's letter to the hospitality group's legal team, outlining the unresolved IP questions, was enough to make them pause, but because due diligence revealed such to deal through, my father had represented to the buyers that all intellectual property was fully owned by the corporation. That representation was false, and making a false representation to induce a commercial transaction in Canada is not a civil matter. It's fraud. I didn't report it. I want to be honest about that. I didn't make a call. I didn't send a letter. What happened is that the hospitality group's lawyers, once they discovered the misrepresentation, made their own complaint. I only found out when my lawyer called me on a Wednesday afternoon and said carefully that there had been a development. My father-in-law was not arrested at a party or a product launch. He wasn't handcuffed in front of a crowd. It was much quieter and, honestly, much worse for him. A formal investigation, a long process, the kind of thing that follows you in the commercial real estate world where your reputation is the only currency that matters. His lawyer called my lawyer. There were conversations about settlements. None of those conversations involved me being generous. My husband called me once during that period. He said he hadn't known about the misrepresentation to the buyers. He said his father had handled that side of things without telling him the details. He said he was sorry. He said it with the specific tone of someone with the specific someone who is sorry about consequences rather than sorry about choices, and I think on some level he understood the difference because he didn't ask me to do anything with the apology. He just said it, and then we were both quiet for a while and then the call ended. I filed for divorce in June. He didn't contest it. Fern and Flower is still open. I bought out the other shareholders. The corporation had to be restructured, which required their cooperation, which I exchanged for my agreement not to pursue certain civil claims that my lawyer assured me I had a reasonable case for. My father-in-law got a number that was much smaller than $2.3 million. His daughter got nothing for her months of brand management because she had been paid a salary. And the contract, which I had actually read carefully by that point, included a standard work-for-hire clause. I hired a real operations manager. I found a business lawyer I trust who doesn't know my in-laws. I brought on a second baker because I finally admitted to myself that I cannot make everything alone, and that admitting that is not weakness. The cardamom honey cake is still on the menu. My grandmother doesn't know the whole story. She's 83 and I don't see the point of upsetting her. But she came in last spring and sat at the corner table by the window and had a slice with her tea, and she looked around at the space and said, "You built something real here." I said I knew. She said, "Don't let anyone tell you it was easy, because it wasn't." I didn't tell her how right she was. I just poured her more tea and sat across from her and let the afternoon go slow for once, flour in the air and the smell of something warm in the oven, and thought about how the hardest thing I ever did wasn't opening this place. It was keeping it.